What would you do if every door slammed shut in your face, and the only one left open led straight into the arms of a stranger you had never met, in a land so wild it didn't even have a name on most maps? Stick around, because today we're riding into the heart of the American frontier. A story of a woman nobody wanted, a man who had nothing left to lose, and a choice made in the dust of a Wyoming afternoon that changed both of their lives forever. Before this is over, you'll understand what it truly meant to start over when starting over was the only option left. And trust me, what happens in the last few minutes of this story? Nobody sees it coming. The year is 1882. The place, a patch of hard Wyoming earth called Cutter's Bluff. The wind came before anything else. It always did out there. It rolled across the flatlands in long, horizontal walls, bending the tall grass flat against the ground, like something enormous was crawling through it. And on most days, the only man who stood against it without flinching was Elias Cobb, 38 years old, shoulders like a barn door, hands so cracked from the cold that they bled every winter without him noticing. Elias had homesteaded his 160 acres 8 years before, back when the government was handing out land like it was worth nothing, which, to most people back east, it was. He'd built the cabin himself. He'd broken the soil himself. He'd buried his wife, Clara, himself. 2 winters back, influenza, the kind that came fast and left no room to say goodbye. After that, the land just sat there. It didn't care. The wheat still needed planting. The cattle still needed moving. The fence on the north pasture still needed fixing. And Elias still woke up every morning at 5 a.m. and did all of it, alone, because that was the only thing he knew how to do. His neighbor, an old German named Horst Müller, who chewed tobacco and gave unsolicited advice in equal measure, told him plain one evening, "Elias, a man alone on this land doesn't last. You need someone." Elias didn't answer. He just kept sharpening his fence post. But here's the thing. Horst wasn't wrong, and somewhere, buried under all that silence and all that stubbornness, Elias Cobb knew it too. Now, before we go any further, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you were the last pick? Like every room you walked into had already decided it didn't need you? Because that was the reality for a woman named Maren Solberg, and her story starts not in Wyoming, but in a cramped apartment above a fishmonger's shop in Baltimore, Maryland. Maren was 29 years old, which in 1882 might as well have been a crime. By Baltimore standards, she was past the age when a respectable woman was supposed to have already married, already settled, already become someone's wife and someone's mother, and faded quietly into the background of someone else's life. She hadn't done any of those things, not because she hadn't tried. She'd been engaged once, a merchant's son named Gerald, who had good shoes and a weak chin, and who, 6 weeks before the wedding, decided he preferred a younger cousin from Philadelphia. She'd worked as a seamstress after that, then as a laundress, then as a cook for a family in Fells Point, who let her go when their daughter came home from school and needed the room. By the spring of 1882, Maren Solberg had no job, no family. Her parents had passed, her brother had gone west, and hadn't written in 3 years, and 42 cents to her name. And then she saw the advertisement. It was tucked between a notice for a lost dog and a listing for a piano in the Baltimore Sun. 4 lines, barely anything. Widowed farmer, Wyoming Territory, seeks capable woman of good character for honest partnership. No prettiness required, only steadiness. No prettiness required, only steadiness. She read it 3 times. Then she folded the paper and put it in her coat pocket, and walked back to her apartment and sat at the table for a very long time. The next morning, she wrote back, Here's what nobody tells you about mail-order arrangements in the 1880s. And this is where it gets genuinely interesting. So lean in. It wasn't romance. Let's be direct about that. Most of these arrangements were economic contracts dressed up in the language of courtship. The men needed labor partners, someone to cook, mend, tend a garden, maybe raise children. The women needed survival. Love, if it ever showed up, was a bonus nobody had budgeted for. What made Maren's situation unusual, and I want you to hold on to this detail because it comes back later, is that she answered 11 other advertisements that same week. 11 different men across 5 states. And every single one of them, after exchanging 2 or 3 letters, went silent. Or wrote back to say they'd found someone else. Or sent a letter so cold it might as well have been written by a bank. Every one of them, except Elias. Elias Cobb wrote back in 11 days. His handwriting was uneven. All the letters slightly too large, like a man who learned to write late in life and never quite got comfortable with it. But what he wrote stopped Maren cold. Miss Solberg, I will not waste your time with false words. I am not a man of great means or great talk. I have 160 acres, 40 head of cattle, 2 horses, a dog named Price, and a roof that does not leak except in heavy rain. My wife died 22 months ago. I do not expect you to replace her. I only ask for honest work and honest company. If that is something you are willing to consider, I would be grateful to hear from you again. Tandoblat. She wrote back that same night. They exchanged 12 letters over the next 8 weeks. He told her about the cattle. She told him about the city, the smells, the noise, the way the streets felt like they were always chewing on you. He told her about Clara. She told him about Gerald. Neither of them mentioned love. But between the lines of those letters, in the way he asked if she was afraid of horses, in the way she asked what the Wyoming sky actually looked like, something was starting, something neither of them had a word for. On June the 12th, 1882, Maren Solberg boarded a westbound train with a single trunk and the kind of feeling you get right before you jump off something very high. Now, if you're watching this and thinking, wait, was this normal? Did women actually just pack up and marry strangers? Drop a comment below, because the history of frontier marriages is one of those chapters that most people have never actually read, and the truth is a whole lot stranger and more human than the myths. I want to know what you think. The train ride took 4 days and 3 nights. She passed through Pittsburgh, then Chicago, then crossed into the flat immensity of the plains and watched the world slowly stop having edges. No mountains yet, just grass and sky and the occasional farmhouse that looked like it had been dropped from a great height and simply stayed where it landed. She arrived at the station in a town called Cutter's Junction, a single platform, a general store, a saloon, a church, on a Tuesday afternoon in late June, when the heat was so solid, it seemed like you could lean against it. Elias was waiting. He was taller than she'd imagined, hat in hand, wearing a clean shirt that still had the fold creases from being stored. He looked like a man who had rehearsed exactly what to say, and then forgot every word of it the moment she stepped off the train. What he actually said was, "You made it." What she said was, "It's bigger than I thought." And he didn't know if she meant Wyoming or him, and she didn't clarify. They rode the 12 miles to the homestead in a wagon pulled by a brown horse named Clover, and neither of them said much, not because there was nothing to say, because there was far too much. The homestead was real. That's the first thing Maren noticed. Wasn't a dream or an exaggeration. 160 acres of high grass prairie, a cabin with 3 rooms, and actual glass windows, a luxury not everyone out here could afford. A small barn, a kitchen garden that had been badly neglected, and the biggest sky she had ever stood under in her life. She stood in the yard for almost a full minute, just looking up. Elias watched her. He didn't say anything, but Price the dog came and sat next to her boot, and she reached down and put her hand on his head, and that seemed to settle something. They married the following Saturday. The pastor from Cutter's Junction came out. Horst Miller and his wife Greta stood as witnesses. Greta cried. Horst chewed his tobacco. The whole thing took 11 minutes. That night, Elias slept in the barn because he hadn't asked her to share a room yet, and he wasn't the kind of man who would without asking. She lay in the cabin alone and listened to the prairie wind and thought, "What have you done, Maren Solberg?" Not with fear, just with the weight of it. The first month was work, just work. That was what held them together and also kept them safely apart. She fixed the kitchen garden, planted beans, onions, squash, a row of sunflowers she hadn't asked permission for. He noticed the sunflowers but didn't mention them. She woke before him, had coffee on by the time he came in from the morning check of the cattle. She learned to ride, badly at first, then with determination, then with something approaching competence. He was patient when she fell, patient in a way that surprised her. Most men she'd known turned impatient the moment something wasn't happening the way they expected. But here's the thing, and pay close attention here, because this is the center of the whole story. Maren was good at this, not just tolerant of frontier life, actually good. She understood hard work the way some people understand music, intuitively in her bones. She repaired fence posts. She preserved 4 dozen jars of vegetables by August. She figured out why the north pasture fence kept failing. The soil there was too soft for standard posts, and told Elias, and he listened, and they fixed it together over 3 days. He started coming in for dinner and not leaving right away. He started lingering. He started talking. And she started to see the person underneath the silence. Now, here's where I need you to subscribe to this channel, because we're about to get into the part of the story where everything flips upside down. And if you're not subscribed yet, and this video gets buried by the algorithm, you're going to miss what comes next. Hit subscribe and the bell, because what Maren discovers in August is going to change everything you thought you understood about why nobody wanted her. Go ahead. We'll wait. It was a dry summer. Everyone in Cutter's Bluff knew it. The creek that fed the east side of Elias's property had been dropping since June, and by August, it was a flat brown stripe, barely deep enough to wet a boot. Then the letter came. It arrived on a Thursday from a land office in Cheyenne. Legal language, formal tone. The short version, a cattle company, one of the big ones pushing east out of Montana, was contesting the water rights to the creek. They claimed a prior claim that predated Elias's homestead filing. If the claim held, Elias would lose access to the only reliable water source on the property. Without that water, the cattle couldn't survive a second dry summer. Without the cattle, the whole enterprise collapsed. Elias read the letter twice, folded it, and put it on the table. He sat down. He put his face in his hands. Maren read it. Then she said, "Do you have your original filing papers?" He looked up. "Somewhere. Find them. Tonight." He found them. They spent the next 2 hours at the kitchen table with a lantern between them, going through every document. Maren had a mind for paperwork. She'd managed records for the laundry in Baltimore, kept inventory for the family in Fells Point. She knew how to read legal language the way you learn to read weather, by looking for what it was hiding. She found it. Buried in the cattle company's claim was a date discrepancy. Their prior claim was filed 14 months after Elias's homestead registration. Someone had been sloppy, or had assumed the homesteader wouldn't know how to look. "They're wrong," she said, "or they're lying. Either way, this claim doesn't hold." Elias stared at her. "How do you know that?" "Because their filing date is here, and yours is here. and yours came first by more than a year. He looked at the papers. He looked at her, and something in his face, something that had been closed for a very long time, opened just slightly. They rode to Cheyenne together, 48 miles in a wagon, 2 days each way, to file a counter-complaint with the land office. Elias did the talking. He knew the territory, knew the officials. Maren sat beside him with the documents in her lap, and her posture straight, and her face giving nothing away. The land agent, a thin man with enormous mustaches, and the general attitude of someone who believed women at legal proceedings were a recent and unwelcome development, addressed every question to Elias. Elias answered exactly. 2 of them before turning to Maren and saying, "She found the discrepancy. Ask her." The land agent blinked, adjusted his mustaches, asked her. She answered him for 40 minutes, referencing specific document numbers and filing dates from memory. By the end, even the agent's mustaches seemed slightly less hostile. The counter-complaint was accepted. The cattle company's claim was denied 3 weeks later. That evening, the night they got back to the homestead, Elias was unhitching Clover from the wagon when Maren came out of the cabin with 2 cups of coffee and sat on the porch step. He finished with the horse and came and sat beside her, not at a polite distance, right beside her. They sat like that for a long time, watching the last of the sun drain out of the Wyoming sky, which, she could now confirm, was not like any sky she had ever described in a letter. It was wider, deeper, the kind of sky that made you feel like you were standing on the surface of something enormous. "You didn't have to come," he said. "To Cheyenne." "Yes, I did," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Why?" She thought about that, thought about 11 advertisements and 11 silences, thought about Baltimore and Gerald and the seamstress work and the 42 cents, thought about a 4-line newspaper ad that said no prettiness required. "Because this is mine too," she said. "You said it would be. Honest work, honest company." He nodded slowly. Then he said something she hadn't expected. "I'm glad nobody else picked you." She almost laughed. "Almost. That's a terrible thing to say." "I know," he said. "I mean it anyway. The question I want to leave in the comments, and I genuinely want to know your take on this, is, do you think what happened between Elias and Maren was love? Or was it something else? Something the 1880s didn't have a name for? Something built out of shared hardship and mutual respect that maybe runs deeper than what most people call romance? Tell me below." I read every single comment. By October, the cabin had changed. Small things: a curtain she'd sewn for the window above the kitchen basin, a second chair on the porch. The sunflowers, now dried and hung upside down from the barn ceiling, because she'd read somewhere that was what you did with them. Price, the dog, had taken to sleeping in the kitchen rather than outside. Elias moved back into the cabin. Nobody made a formal announcement about it. It happened the way most things on that homestead happened. Quietly, practically, without ceremony. But one evening in early November, when the first real cold was coming down from the north and the grass had gone the color of dry straw, Elias came in from the fields and found Maren at the table writing a letter. "Who's that to?" he asked. "My brother," she said. "In Oregon. I'm telling him I'm well." Elias hung his coat on the hook, poured himself coffee, sat across from her, and watched her write. "Are you?" he asked.
I think so.
"Well?" She stopped writing. She set the pen down. She looked at him. This man with the cracked hands, and the too large handwriting, and the fold-creased shirt he'd worn the day he came to meet a stranger at a train station. And she said,
I think it's the right choice.
"More than I've been in a long time." He nodded. He picked up the coffee. He said nothing else, but she saw it. That thing in his face that had been slowly opening since August. Opened just a little bit more. The winter came hard. 1882 into 1883 was one of the worst on record for that part of Wyoming. 3 feet of snow in December. Temperatures that froze the pump handle solid for 11 consecutive mornings. A week in January, where they couldn't leave the cabin at all. And here's the thing about being trapped with someone in a space the size of 3 rooms. You learn them. Every habit. Every silence. The way Elias hummed something tuneless when he was working through a problem. The way Maren went completely still and focused when she was reading. The way he laughed, which was rare, but which, when it happened, arrived like unexpected sunlight through clouds. The cattle lost 7 head that winter. Elias grieved each one the way most people don't grieve animals. Quietly, genuinely, without embarrassment. It told her something about him that no letter ever could have. By spring, Cutter's Bluff had started to talk, not unkindly, mostly with the particular fascination that small communities develop toward anything that breaks from expectation. People had assumed the mail order arrangement would fall apart inside a month. Here it was, 9 months later, and Elias Cobb was smiling at the general store. Elias Cobb, who had not been seen to smile at anything since Clara. Greta Mueller said to her husband, "I told you." Horst chewed his tobacco and said nothing, but he was satisfied. There's a moment I want to describe carefully, because it is the center of everything. It was March. The snow was pulling back from the south-facing slopes. The cattle were coming through. The creek was rising. Elias was out mending the east fence, the good fence, the one that had held, and Maren brought him lunch on horseback, which she could now do without thinking about it. She tied the horse and sat on the fence rail beside him, and they ate. Cornbread she'd made, salt pork, cold coffee. Not a romantic lunch by any standard anyone back in Baltimore would recognize. And Elias said, out of nowhere, mid-bite, "I want to put in an apple tree this year." She looked at him. "An apple tree takes years to produce." "I know," he said. And she understood, in the way you understand something not with your mind, but with your chest, that he was talking about more than apples, that a man who had been living one season at a time, just surviving, just getting through, was now thinking in years. Plural, in a future that included her. She said, "Put in 2. He looked at her, something in his eyes, something warm and enormous and patient. Then he nodded once and went back to his cornbread. They put in 2 apple trees that April, planted them on the south side of the cabin where the sun was strongest. It would be 3 years before they produced anything. Neither of them mentioned that. Neither of them needed to. By summer of 1883, Maren Solberg, Maren Cobb now, which still felt strange and then gradually didn't, had built a life she hadn't been able to imagine from a Baltimore apartment above a fishmonger's shop. Not a perfect life. There was still hardship. There were still bad harvests and broken equipment, and the grinding loneliness of a frontier winter. There were still nights when she missed the city in ways she couldn't explain and didn't try to. But there was also this, a man who listened, who asked her opinion and meant it, who one November evening, after she'd spent an hour figuring out why the south pasture water was pooling wrong, looked at her across the kitchen table and said simply, "I don't know what I would do without you." Not poetry, not performance, just the plain truth, delivered by a man who didn't know how to be anything but plain. She said, "You'd manage," he said. "I don't want to." And that, right there, that is the moment nobody in Baltimore would have predicted for a 29-year-old seamstress with 42 cents and no prospects. That is the moment that no advertisement in a newspaper could have promised. That is what grew, slowly and stubbornly and without fanfare, out of honest work and honest company, and two people who showed up for each other in the hard moments when it would have been easier to pull back. Nobody wanted Maren Solberg. And then one lonely farmer in Wyoming said, "You are mine." And she said, "Then I suppose you are mine too." In the years that followed, the Cobb homestead grew. They added 40 more acres in 1885. The apple trees bore fruit for the first time in the summer of 1887. Small, tart, imperfect apples that Maren made into preserves, and Elias ate straight off the branch. They had a daughter in 1886, a boy in 1888. Horst Miller died in 1890 and left them his fence posts, which was the most Horst kind of bequest imaginable. Maren never went back to Baltimore. She wrote to her brother in Oregon, and he eventually came west and settled 30 miles north, and they saw each other twice a year, which, on the frontier, counted as close. The cabin got a second room added in 1889. The pump handle stopped freezing in the mornings once Elias figured out how to lag the pipe. Price the dog lived to be 14, which was longer than most people expected a dog on the frontier to last, and was buried under the apple trees when he went. And every morning, for as long as they were both standing, one of them made the coffee before the other woke up. Before we go, and I want to say this in a way that feels right, take a second and think about what this story is actually about. It's not about romance in the way we usually tell it. It's about steadiness, about showing up, about two people who had both been passed over, both been told by the world they weren't quite what was needed, and who found in each other someone who finally disagreed. If you've made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person this channel is for. Subscribe if you haven't. Every story we tell is built with the same care as this one, and there are a lot more coming. The frontier is full of them. Drop a comment. What did you take from Maren and Elias's story? Was it love? Was it something else? Was it both? I want to read your answer. This video is an artistic reconstruction created using artificial intelligence, developed independently and exclusively to entertain and bring value. The characters, events, settings, and situations depicted here are fictional and are the product of creative imagination. This is not a historical document. For verified historical accounts of frontier life, mail-order marriages, and the American West, please consult academic sources, regional archives, and the work of historians who have dedicated their careers to this period. The goal here is to make these human experiences feel alive. And we hope, in some way, we did that tonight.